The night is heavy with stillness. Moonlight drifts through the fractured glass of an abandoned greenhouse, falling in silver ribbons across the floor. Dust hangs in the air, suspended like forgotten stars. The world outside is hushed, but inside, there is a feeling, an almost imperceptible hum, as though the leaves themselves are waiting. You are here now, a guest in this forgotten sanctuary. Listen closely. Can you hear it? That faint, quivering breath beneath the silence. It is not the wind. It is not the creak of old wood. It is something deeper, something alive. Before we begin, allow me to gently ask if you enjoy stories like this. If you feel the pull of mystery and the calm of wandering through hidden worlds, subscribe to The Sleepy Scientist. It helps this small corner of the internet grow, just as seeds grow silently in the dark. You are part of that growth. And now, let us return to the greenhouse. They called him many things in his time: a botanist, a dreamer, a man who listened too much to silence. And eventually, they called him Forgotten. His name slipped from the lips of scholars and fell into dust, but his work remained buried in notebooks, whispered in roots, scattered like pollen across the soil. He believed that plants were not mute. He believed they spoke, not in words, but in patterns, vibrations, echoes beneath the frequencies of ordinary life. People laughed at him. They mocked his obsession with what he called the midnight garden. But in the quiet hours, when the city slept and the world forgot its noise, he returned here, to this greenhouse of broken glass and tangled vines, and in the dark he listened. Imagine him standing there, thin, tired, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. His hand rests on the rough stem of a dying plant, yet he does not see it as dying. He sees it as speaking. To him, every withering leaf is a sentence, every blossom a question, every root a memory threading back into the soil of centuries. And so, he asks the question that will carry us through this story. Do plants dream when the sun disappears? Do they remember the shadows as much as they remember the light? The greenhouse answers with silence, and yet the silence feels heavier than words. When you stand in a place like this, you notice small things: the way vines crawl over forgotten books, the way the glass panes rattle softly though the air is still, the way the soil, though undisturbed, seems to breathe. He noticed these things, and he wrote them down in delicate, looping handwriting, pages upon pages, night after night. But then came the night that would change everything. It began with a sound, not loud, not startling, but steady, a low hum rising from beneath the soil. At first, he thought it was the groaning of the old pipes, or perhaps the far-off echo of machinery in the city. But as he pressed his ear closer to the ground, he realized the sound was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. He froze, his breath caught in his chest. The greenhouse, lit only by fractured moonlight, seemed to lean closer around him. Shadows lengthened, bending like watchful figures. The hum continued, pulsing through the earth, as though the roots themselves were alive with something more than life, something aware. He ran his fingers through the soil, expecting to find nothing but the usual damp earth and tangled fibers. Instead, his hand brushed against something smooth, round, cold. He dug carefully, his pulse matching the hum, until he uncovered it, a faintly glowing seed. It was unlike anything he had seen before, small enough to fit in the palm of his hand. Yet it radiated a soft light, like the afterglow of fireflies on a summer night. The glow seemed to throb with the rhythm of the hum, as if the seed itself was breathing. He lifted it closer to his face, and in that moment, a strange thought bloomed in his mind. Not his thought, not quite, but something that arrived as if whispered directly into his skull. We are awake. He dropped the seed, heart racing, and stumbled back. The words echoed, though no mouth had spoken them. The greenhouse felt suddenly smaller, suffocating, alive. Leaves trembled without wind. The vines seemed to creep forward, inching toward his feet. He stared at the seed, glowing faintly on the soil, and for the first time in years, he was afraid. The question came again, louder this time. Do plants dream when the sun disappears? And for the first time, he wondered if the answer was yes, not only yes, but something far beyond dreaming. The night stretched on, heavy and endless, and the seed's glow did not fade. It pulsed steadily, patiently, as if waiting for him to act. He could not bring himself to touch it again, not yet. Instead, he retreated into his notes, his trembling hand scrawling across the pages. The soil speaks, the seed glows. I am not alone, but deep inside, he already knew he was no longer the observer. He was the observed, and as the clock struck midnight, the hum deepened, spreading through the greenhouse like a second heartbeat. The forgotten botanist closed his eyes, listening to the rhythm that seemed to come from beneath the world itself, and realized that he had stepped into something much larger than discovery. Something alive, something ancient, something growing in the dark. And yet, as the night held him captive, he had no idea that this was only the beginning, that the whispers he had just heard were the first words in a language older than humanity itself. The seed waited. The soil breathed. Expectant darkness. The greenhouse never slept after that night, though the botanist had left the glowing seed where it lay. Its quiet radiance seeped into every corner of the glass house. By day, it dulled, hiding itself under the weight of sunlight. But at night, when the world held its breath, the glow returned, soft, steady, pulsing, like the patient heartbeat of something ancient, waiting. He could not resist. Every evening, long after the city's lamps had flickered out, he found himself walking back to the greenhouse. His shoes crunched along gravel paths overgrown with weeds. His lantern swayed in his hand, and always he carried with him a notebook, thick with ink-stained pages. His handwriting had grown frantic. What began as observations had turned into confessions. The soil hums, the leaves tremble, the silence watches. He wrote like a man possessed, though he could not have explained to whom his words were addressed. Perhaps to himself, perhaps to the seed, perhaps to something older, something listening. And in those pages, he began to return to memory. Not just the memory of plants, but his own. He remembered the first time he pressed his ear to the earth as a child, the meadow behind his childhood. Home was alive, with grasses taller than his small frame, swaying like oceans in the summer wind. He swore he heard them whispering, not random rustles, but words. His mother had laughed when he told her. His father had frowned, and so the boy had learned early to keep such things quiet, to let curiosity bloom in the dark, in secret. Now, years later, kneeling in the greenhouse with the glowing seed before him, he wondered, Had the plants been speaking to him all along? Had he mistaken their voices for imagination? Or was imagination itself nothing more than listening carefully to what others could not hear? He dug into the soil again, not to touch the seed, but to trace the network of roots surrounding it. They were knotted, thick, far too complex for the shallow pot in which they grew. They reminded him of veins in a human hand twisting, pulsing with hidden life. He followed them with his fingers, and in his mind a question stirred like a tide. Are roots the earth's memory? He thought of how roots reach down through centuries, drinking from layers of soil touched by countless lives. He thought of fallen leaves turning to dust, bones dissolving into earth, tears sinking into ground. What if plants remembered all of it? What if every sorrow, every joy, every fleeting breath of humanity left its trace beneath their roots? The thought frightened him, yet filled him with awe. That night, the hum beneath the soil grew stronger. His instruments, long neglected, covered in cobwebs, sprang to life when he set them near the seed. Needles quivered, glass tubes filled with faint vibrations, inked pens scratched erratic lines onto paper without his hand. It was as though the seed had awakened his machines, commanding them to write a language he had never taught them. And then, as he bent low over the soil, he swore he heard something more. Not words this time, not even whispers, but a memory. It came not through his ears, but directly into his mind, sharp, vivid, undeniable. He was standing in a forest he had never walked before. Tall trees stretched like pillars into a canopy of endless green. Shafts of light pierced through, painting the air in golden dust. And all around him was the sound of leaves, rustling not in wind, but in chorus. A voice within many voices. The memory was not his. He knew that. It belonged to the roots, to the earth itself. He stumbled back from the vision, breathless heart pounding. His knees struck the wooden floorboards, and he stared at the glowing seed as though it had betrayed him. His notebooks slipped from his hand, pages scattering like broken wings. He whispered into the silence, his voice trembling. "What are you?" The seed pulsed once, then twice, and then, like the faintest reply, the hum beneath the soil deepened in that moment. The greenhouse felt less like a place of study and more like a cathedral. The shadows rose like columns, vines swayed like silent choirs, and the seed at the center was its altar. He had not uncovered a specimen. He had stepped into a sanctuary, but sanctuaries are never without secrets. The days that followed blurred. He no longer left the greenhouse at dawn. Meals were forgotten. Sleep came only in fragments. He lived in the glow of the seed, in the pulse of the roots, in the memories that slid unbidden into his mind. Sometimes they were of forests, sometimes of meadows long turned to dust. Once he saw a desert bloom, every grain of sand holding the memory of vanished rivers, and once, only once, he saw himself, a reflection not from his own past, but as though the plants had watched him all his life, storing fragments of his childhood laughter, his loneliness, his tears. The greenhouse seemed to whisper, "We remember you." He did not know whether to feel comforted or terrified. The nights grew heavier, the hum louder. The greenhouse no longer seemed to belong to him. He belonged to it. The old journals, buried beneath broken pots and rusted tools, he uncovered a crate sealed with wax. Inside lay notebooks, not written in his hand, but in another's, yellowed with age. The ink faded, but legible. The handwriting was steady, careful, belonging to a scientist who had lived long before him, and in those pages his blood ran cold, for he saw his own thoughts reflected back at him. Words about humming soil, notes about roots as memory, sketches of seeds that glowed faintly in the night. He realized, with a jolt that nearly stopped his heart, that he was not the first. Others had heard the whispers before. Others had found the seeds. Others had been forgotten. The last entry of the oldest journal read only this: "The midnight bloom approaches. When it comes, do not look directly. Do not listen too closely. Do not." The sentence ended in a jagged stroke, as though the writer's hand had been torn from the page. The botanist's lantern flickered. The hum beneath the soil surged like thunder. And in the silence that followed, a leaf curled, blackened. His heart pounded as he wondered, was he walking the same path as those before him? Was he too destined to be forgotten? The hum answered with a steady rhythm, and for the first time he thought he heard within it not only memory, but warning. The nights no longer felt like nights. Time itself, blurred inside the greenhouse, stretched thin like a veil, trembling with the hum that seeped through every inch of soil and glass. He began to forget the rhythm of the sun, the noise of the city. Beyond the gates, all that existed was this place, this pulse, this glow. The journals haunted him. Each fragile page seemed to breathe with the same rhythm as the seed. The words written long before his birth mirrored his own, as though the thoughts of the forgotten were waiting for him to uncover them, waiting to be remembered. Their warnings pressed on his chest like a weight. Do not look directly. Do not listen too closely. And yet, how could he resist? Curiosity had long since overtaken caution, so he began to listen more carefully, not only to the hum beneath the soil, but to the leaves themselves. At first, he thought it was his imagination, the faint rustle when there was no wind, the tremble of stems when the air was still. He placed his old instruments around the greenhouse, wires coiled like snakes, needles trembling in glass jars, ink pens scratching across scrolls of paper. And when he leaned close to the nearest plant, he felt its tiny vibrations quivering against his skin, as though the leaf itself was breathing words too quiet for the ear. "Speak," he whispered. "If you can, speak." And something answered. It was not language, not at first. It was rhythm. Pulses that rose and fell in measured beats. A trembling that traveled from one leaf to another, as if carried through invisible threads. He tapped, his fingers in response, matching the rhythm like a drum echoing through silence. And to his astonishment, the leaves changed their pattern, as though responding to him. It was crude at first, like trying to converse through glass. But the more he listened, the more he tapped, the more he felt the gap narrowing. He thought of it like music, a duet between man and plant. His hand trembling, tapping against the wooden table. The leaves shivering, answering, a back and forth. A conversation born not of words, but of vibrations. Night after night, he practiced. He wrote every pattern into his notebooks, lines of dots and dashes, arcs and pauses. Soon, he realized it was not random. There was structure, rules, a syntax buried in the hum. The journals of the forgotten botanists, though none had followed it as far as he now dared. They had written of plants that could remember storms, of roots that could echo footsteps years after they had fallen. But he had gone further. He had heard the leaves answer, and then, one night, something extraordinary happened. He leaned close to a cluster of ivy tangled along the glass. He tapped his fingers softly against the wood. The leaves quivered, answering with their usual rhythm. But then, suddenly, they shifted. The pattern became sharper, more precise. A rhythm he had never heard before. His instruments scratched violently, the ink bleeding across the page, and then clearer than the silence. Around him the rhythm broke into something unmistakable. A word, not perfect, not whole, but close enough that his breath caught in his throat. He stumbled back, eyes wide, heart hammering in his chest. He repeated aloud, voice trembling. Who? The leaves rustled, trembling as though laughing at him. The ivy's pattern shifted, again, faster now, urgent. His instruments scratched the paper raw, needles whipping wildly. Another word formed, jagged and halting, awake. He sank into his chair, his hands gripping the arms so tightly the wood creaked. He stared at the leaves, which quivered gently in the moonlight, and for the first time he realized this was no longer listening. This was speaking. The plants were speaking. He pressed his hands to his face, torn between awe and terror. Was he losing his mind? Was exhaustion bending reality? Or had the whispers been there all along, waiting for someone to notice? The question gnawed at him, but another followed close behind. If plants can speak, then what do they want to say? The answer did not come in words, but in a flood of sensation. As he touched the ivy again, his body was filled with sudden, overwhelming impressions: heat of the sun, coolness of rain, weight of soil pressing down, centuries of patient growth. But beneath it all was something more, something that did not belong to mere plants. It was memory, human memory. He staggered under the weight of it, visions not his own. A woman crying at a graveside, her tears falling into the roots of grass. A man whispering a prayer in a forest, his hand pressed to the bark of a tree. Children laughing as they wove flowers into crowns, their voices sinking into the soil. The ivy remembered it all. He tore his hand away, gasping for breath, his chest tight with fear and wonder. The journals had been right. Roots carried memory. Leaves spoke it. Plants were the silent witnesses of the world. And if they could speak now, after centuries of silence, why? The seed pulsed in the soil behind him, glowing brighter than ever. He turned slowly, his shadow stretching long across the greenhouse floor. The seed's light flickered like a heartbeat, faster, stronger, urgent. He realized then that the ivy had not spoken alone. The seed was teaching them, awakening them, using him as a bridge. The greenhouse trembled with unseen life. Leaves shivered in unison. Vines crept across the glass, twisting, curling, listening. His instruments whirred and scratched until the ink spilled over the pages. And then, from the deepest corner of the greenhouse, almost metallic, the botanist's eyes widened as he leaned forward. The petals unfurled slowly. Not the familiar anatomy of any flower he had ever studied. A tiny, glowing mouth it opened, and it whispered his name. The greenhouse was no longer a place of study. It was aleve, wall, every leaf, every root watching him. The flower that had opened in the dark still trembled on its stem, its small mouth pulsing faintly with light, like a lantern struggling against the weight of silence. It had whispered his name, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Each time, softer, as though testing the sound. tasting it on the edges of its glow. The botanist's skin prickled, a chill sliding up his spine as the air around him thickened. The familiar scent of soil and moss was drowned by something sharper, metallic, electric, like the air before a storm. He could not move. His notebook slid from his hand, pages fanning across the wooden floor. His name still echoed in his ears, though the flower had fallen silent. He wanted to flee, to shatter the glass and run into the night, but he could not. Curiosity shackled him where fear could not. At last, he forced his lips to part. His voice was thin, shaking. "What are you?" For a long, unbearable moment, there was only silence. The flower's glow dimmed, then brightened, as though deciding, and then, with a tremor that rattled the ivy along the glass, the word came, "Remember." The botanist staggered back, colliding with the table of instruments. Glass cracked, needles spun, ink spilled across the floor in black rivers. His heart thundered. "Remember what?" he demanded, his voice breaking. The flower shivered, its petals twitching as if straining against some invisible weight. Then the greenhouse changed. The air grew heavy, thick with scent, thick with memory. His vision blurred, and suddenly he was not in the greenhouse anymore. He stood in a vast forest, older than cities, older than names. Towering trees rose into an endless sky. The air thrummed with life, but it was not sound, it was memory. He saw shadows moving between the trunks, figures, human yet indistinct, their outlines trembling like smoke. They walked with heads bowed, whispering words he could not hear. Every step they took pressed into the roots, and the trees shivered, recording their passing. The botanist tried to call out, but his voice made no sound. He stumbled forward, his feet sinking into soil that pulsed like living flesh. And then he saw it, a great tree, massive, its roots spanning farther than the eye could see. Its bark was carved with symbols, grooves that pulsed faintly with light dot. At its base lay hundreds of seeds, glowing like the one in his greenhouse. The voices around him rose. The shadows pressed closer, their whispers growing sharper. He strained to listen, and at last the words pierced him. "We remember." The botanist gasped and fell backward. The vision shattered, and he was once again in the greenhouse, sprawled across the floor, breath ragged. The flower swayed, its mouth closing slowly, as though exhausted. The seed in the soil pulsed violently, throwing long, trembling shadows across the glass walls. His mind reeled. He scrambled to his notes, hands shaking as he scrawled. "The plants do not only live, they remember, they keep us, they keep everything." But a darker thought followed, one he could not ignore. If they remembered everything, then they remembered him. Every secret, every sorrow, every mistake, he thought buried. And as if in reply, the ivy rustled violently, though the air was still. The leaves trembled in a rhythm that shook him to his bones. His instruments scratched across paper, translating the vibrations into jagged marks. He leaned over them, heart racing. The words formed slowly, painfully, until at last they were clear. "We know you." He froze. His mouth went dry. His eyes darted to the glowing seed, then to the flower, then to the shadows lengthening across the glass. The air pulsed with a rhythm that no longer felt like a heartbeat. It felt like breath. The greenhouse itself was breathing. He whispered into the silence, voice thin and desperate. "What do you want from me?" For a moment, nothing. The vines stilled, the glow dimmed, the flower hung limp. Relief touched him like a fragile thread. Perhaps it had ended. Perhaps it was over. But then, from the corner of the greenhouse, a single leaf unfurled with agonizing slowness. Its surface shimmered as though wet, though no water touched it. And on that surface, veins spread in deliberate patterns, not natural, but words. His name, written clearly, unmistakably, in living green. The botanist fell to his knees, his breath catching in his throat. The plants were not only remembering him, they were writing him, recording him, inscribing him into their endless memory. Terror surged, but so did fascination. He reached out, trembling, and touched the living letters. The leaf quivered. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then, with a sound like a sigh, the leaf darkened, its veins spreading into new shapes. His eyes widened as the word formed. A date. It was tomorrow. The botanist's hand fell away, his pulse hammering in his ears. The flower's mouth twitched open once more, and in the faintest whisper it spoke again. Tomorrow. The lantern sputtered. The greenhouse fell into shadow, and in the darkness the seed's glow became unbearable, throbbing like a warning, like a promise, like the first secret of many yet to come. The lantern flickered one last time and died. Darkness swallowed the greenhouse, save for the trembling glow of the seed and the faint breath of the flower. The botanist stood frozen, his heartbeat loud enough to drown out the silence. Tomorrow, the whisper had said, but what tomorrow? What waited for him beyond the veil of roots and soil? His hand shook as he lit another match. The sudden flare of light burned against the glass, revealing 1,000 reflections of his pale, startled face. The flame caught the lantern wick. But in that heartbeat of darkness, before the glass warmed again, he saw something move, a shadow that was not his own. It lingered near the far wall, where the ivy hung thickest, shifting as though a body pressed against the leaves from the other side. He swallowed hard, throat dry. There was no wind. There could be no wind. He raised the lantern, its light quivering with his grip. The shadow remained, stretched long and thin, trembling like a figure made of smoke. The ivy rustled, and a faint hiss rippled through the leaves. He stepped closer, each movement weighed down by dread, until his nose nearly brushed the wall of green. "Who's there?" he whispered. The answer came not in words, but in a ripple. The vines pulled back, curling inwards, peeling themselves from the glass as though opening a curtain. Behind them, pressed against the pane, was a shape, a human outline, dark and hollow. Its eyes glowed faintly, not like fire, but like the same sickly light that lived in the seed. Its mouth moved, but no sound came, only the hiss of leaves bending under invisible weight. The botanist stumbled back, clutching his lantern to his chest. His voice rose, breaking, "What are you?" The figure's mouth widened in silence, and then the vines snapped forward, slamming shut against the glass. The lantern's flame sputtered wildly in the gust, nearly dying. He gasped, lungs burning with the air that had suddenly grown too thin. His gaze darted to the seed. Its glow pulsed faster now, throbbing in rhythm with his own racing pulse. The flower bent toward it, petals quivering, as though the two were speaking in a language of light and silence. He could not understand, but he felt it. He felt watched. He staggered toward his notes, clawing for pen and paper. The ink trembled under his hand, letters twisting as he tried to keep up with his thoughts. The plants are not alone. Figures pressing from the other side. But where is the other side? His hand slipped, ink spilling in a jagged smear across the page. He cursed under his breath, but the sound died as soon as it left him, because the whisper had returned, not from the flower this time, not from the vines, but from everywhere, from the soil beneath the floorboards, from the beams above, from the very air. A chorus of breaths, speaking all at once, layered and haunting. We remember. His vision blurred, the shadows lengthened, bending across the walls, pooling into the corners. Faces flickered within them, faces of people he had never met, faces of people long gone. Men, women, children, their mouths moving in silent echoes. Some wept, some smiled, some looked straight at him with hollow eyes that saw too much. He pressed his palms to his temples, shaking his head violently. No, no, no. But the whispers grew louder, closer, curling into words he could finally understand. We are the roots. We are the forgotten. We are what was left behind. The botanist dropped his pen. His hands shook, sweat running cold along his neck. His mind reeled back to the great tree in his vision, the roots stretching into endless memory. If the shadows were its recorded memory, then these were not ghosts. They were something older, something deeper. The greenhouse groaned, beams creaking as if under unbearable pressure. Leaves fluttered without touch, seeds rattled in their jars. The botanist stumbled to the door, reaching for the handle with trembling fingers. But when he pulled, it did not move. The door was locked, no, not locked, rooted. Thick vines had coiled themselves over the frame, twisting the wood until it bent, sealing him inside. His breath quickened, shallow and panicked. He hammered against the glass, but the night outside stared back at him with blank indifference. The lantern guttered, shadows quivering like predators, circling. Then a sound broke through, a heartbeat, not his own, deep, slow, ancient. It thudded through the soil, rising through the roots, through the walls, through his bones. His chest ached with each pulse, as though his own heart tried to follow its rhythm. And then the flower moved. It turned, slowly, deliberately, facing him fully. Its petals stretched wide, its glow intensifying until the shadows recoiled. Its voice came thin but piercing, as though every leaf in the greenhouse spoke with it. The greenhouse shuddered, the vines hissed, the shadows along the glass thickened, pooling until the glass itself seemed to darken. Faces flickered again, those hollow, weeping figures pressed against the walls of memory. But this time their mouths did not move in silence. They screamed, though no sound came. Their hollow eyes widened, their hands clawed at the glass. The botanist stumbled backward, horror flooding his veins. The red seed pulsed harder, brighter, feeding on the shadow's frenzy. The golden seed strained against it, its glow rising, but the red did not falter. And then, for the first time, the shadow that had stepped into the greenhouse moved closer. It came slowly, its form trembling, its edges unraveling like smoke. But its presence filled the space, pressing against the botanist's lungs, until he could barely breathe. Its voice slid into him, low and terrible. The black seed remembers what must not be healed. The botanist's mind reeled, his hands clenched into fists. What must not be healed? What could that mean? Wounds that could never close. Sorrows that must not fade. He thought of history, of the roots, recording every step, every voice, every life. The golden seed healed, then the black one preserved the wound forever. His heart pounded. He whispered, almost afraid of the sound of His own voice, what happens if it grows? The shadow tilted its head, the flower quivered, the chorus hissed in fragments. And then, in a voice both tender and merciless, the answer came. Then the world remembers all its pain. The botanist froze. Images tore through his mind, unbidden wars, graves, betrayals, losses, every wound carved into human memory, rising again, raw and unhealed. The thought of it crushed his chest, a weight too vast to bear, and yet another thought burned beneath the fear. If all pain returned, then truth would return with it. Every forgotten crime, every silenced voice, every hidden sorrow, was that destruction or justice? His fascination flared again, wild and dangerous. He reached a trembling hand toward the black seed. The flower screamed, not in words, but in a sound like tearing glass, like roots wrenching stone apart. Its glow flared, blinding, hurling shadows against the walls. The red seed pulsed violently, cracks widening, the faint hiss of steam rising from the soil. The botanist's hand hovered inches above it. Heat seared his skin as though the seed bled fire. His breath shook, his curiosity burned, and then the shadow's voice filled him once more. Tomorrow it chooses. His hand fell away as though struck. The words sank into him like hooks, dragging his thoughts into places he dared not go. It was not his choice. It was not the flowers, nor the shadows, nor the golden seeds. The black seed itself would choose. Tomorrow the botanist collapsed back, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. The flower shivered, its glow dimming into faint exhaustion. The red seed pulsed once more, steady and strong, before falling silent. The greenhouse stilled, and in the silence, the botanist realized the most terrifying truth of all. The seeds were not objects, they were alive, and tomorrow one of them would decide his fate. The night did not end. Time moved strangely inside the greenhouse, as though the glass walls had cut him off from the ordinary rhythm of the world. The lantern sat dark and broken at his side, yet he did not need it any more. The glow of the two seeds lit everything golden and red, gentle and jagged, painting the air in dueling colors. The botanist could not look away. He felt their light, sinking into his skin, branding itself into his blood. Each pulse of the golden seed steadied his breath. Each flare of the red one set his veins on fire. He was being torn in two directions, drawn toward healing and wound, memory and pain. He whispered, almost to himself, "What feeds you?" The greenhouse answered in silence at first. The vines hung still, the flower bowed, the shadows pressed against the glass without sound. But then, faintly, almost imperceptibly, the floor trembled. The soil beneath his knees shifted, and he heard it distant, deep. A slow groaning beneath the earth, truths, not the shallow tangles of potted plants, but vast roots, thick as rivers, winding deep below. They groaned like old wood, creaked like bones, pulsed like veins. He pressed his palm to the soil, and the vibration slid into him, a rhythm older than his body, older than his mind. He closed his eyes. The vision came instantly. Darkness under the world, a labyrinth of roots, stretching endlessly in every direction, weaving like veins through black stone. Some glowed faintly gold, alive with warmth, carrying fragments of laughter, whispers, lullabies. Others glowed red, their cracks seething with sorrow. carrying screams and silences that never faded. They tangled together, feeding the two seeds. Above, memory and pain, locked in a slow war beneath the earth. The botanist staggered back from the soil, breath ragged. His mind reeled. He understood now the seeds were not accidents, not anomalies. They were the fruit of something far greater. A tree deeper than the world, roots tangled in history itself. But if the roots fed the seeds, then what had fed the roots? The answer came not in words, but in faces. The shadows pressed harder against the glass, their mouths moving in silent shapes. He saw them clearly, now men clutching spears, women carrying infants, children with wide, hollow eyes. They were not random, they were moments, echoes of lives once lived. The roots drank them, the roots remembered them, and the seeds, gold and red, were the distillation, the heart of healing, the core of pain. His thoughts raced, fevered. What if he could reach those roots? What if he could trace them deeper into the place where all memory began? Could he learn everything? Could he undo death itself? Could he tear the world's secrets from the earth? The hunger inside him grew sharp. He picked up his spade from the corner, its handle worn smooth from years of gentler work. His hand shook as he drove it into the soil, cutting deep. The greenhouse reacted instantly. The flowers snapped open, glowing bright, its voice shrill with warning. Do not dig. The vines lashed out, whipping across the glass, striking the shelves, rattling jars until they shattered. The shadows pressed closer, their faces twisted in silent cries. The air itself grew heavy, hot, choking with the scent of damp earth. But the botanist could not stop. He dug faster, tearing the soil apart with frantic hands when the spade slipped. From his grip, his breath came ragged, his heart thundered, but his mind blazed with obsession. He had to see them. He had to touch the roots, and then his fingers found them. Thick cords of wood, pulsing faintly, glowing through the soil. One golden, one red. He gasped, half in awe, half in terror, as the rhythm thrummed up his arms. The warmth of the golden root wrapped him like a lullaby. The fire of the red one burned him, raw and furious. He could not let go. The voices erupted at once, flooding his head. 1,000 whispers, layered, impossible to separate. He heard laughter, screams, prayers, curses, secrets whispered in the dark. Lives, endless lives, surging into him. He cried out, falling to his knees, hands still tangled in the roots. His vision fractured, faces, places, centuries flashing across his sight. A child laying flowers at a grave, a soldier bleeding into the soil, a mother humming a lullaby, a betrayal whispered in shadows. Every memory, every wound, his body convulsed. Under the flood, yet he could not pull away. He was drowning in the roots, lost in their endless sea. And then, through the storm, a voice cut clear. You are not ready. The botanist gasped, chest heaving. The roots recoiled from his touch, yanking themselves deeper into the soil. He fell forward, face in the dirt, lungs burning as though the earth itself pressed against him. The flower's glow dimmed to a trembling flicker. The greenhouse settled into silence once more. He lay there for a long time, trembling, sweat soaking his shirt. His thoughts were scattered, fragmented, torn apart by what he had glimpsed. He knew only one thing for certain now. The roots did not simply remember, they judged, and tomorrow, when the seeds chose, it would not be a gentle choice. The botanist forced himself to sit upright. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but behind them a wild light grew. He had touched something vast, something that lived beneath the world. He could not stop now. He would not stop. He looked at the two seeds, gold and red, pulsing side by side. His lips trembled, and he whispered into the heavy silence, "Then let tomorrow come." The red seed cracked. A faint hiss rose from the soil, like breath escaping from a wound. Morning never came, at least not in the ordinary sense. The world beyond the greenhouse surely carried on, sun rising, birds calling, shadows shifting across familiar fields, but here, behind the trembling panes of glass, time felt bent, hesitant, as though afraid to step inside. The botanist sat slumped against the soil bed, his hands raw from digging, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless hours. The roots he had touched still echoed inside him. Every blink was haunted by flashes of faces he had never known. Every breath carried fragments of laughter and screams that did not belong to him. And yet, in his exhaustion, he was awake in a way he had never been before. The golden seed glowed softly, like a steady lantern in a long corridor. The red seed pulsed with irregular bursts, like a wound reopening again and again. Between them, the flower leaned, trembling as if listening to a storm only it could hear. The botanist's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Tomorrow. You said tomorrow they would choose." The flower did not answer. It swayed gently, a rhythm too subtle to decipher. He pushed himself closer, trembling. What happens if the wrong one is chosen? At that, the shadows stirred. They pressed their faceless forms against the glass, black silhouettes etched against the dim glow. Their mouths moved in silence, but the botanist no longer needed ears to understand. He felt their meaning crawl directly into his bones. If the golden seed took root, memory would heal, wounds would soften, grief would fade. If the red seed claimed the soil, pain would sharpen, histories would burn hotter, old scars would split wide, and the earth would groan under their weight. It was not a choice between good and evil. It was a choice between remembering and forgetting. The botanist's chest tightened. He thought of his own life, the losses, the regrets, the moments he wished he could erase. Would healing mean peace or erasure? Would pain mean truth or endless torment? The flower's glow flickered weakly. "Every garden grows what it is fed," it whispered at last. "But the gardener is always changed." He froze. Changed how? No answer came. Only the faint tremble of leaves. The botanist stood on shaking legs and paced the greenhouse floor. His boots cracked old tiles, scattering shards of fallen glass. He could not stop thinking of the roots he had touched. They were not just wood, not just vessels. They were veins of memory itself. Every life, and now he stood between their fruit. A mortal man with dirt under his nails, asked to choose the direction of all that memory. A surge of anger rose in him. "Why me?" he demanded, his voice cracking against the glass walls. "Why not someone wiser, someone stronger? Why drag me into this?" The shadows shifted, their silent faces turned as one. He understood their answer before it formed inside him. Because he had dug, because he had asked, because he could not leave well enough alone. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, his breath fogging the surface. He thought of his years cataloging plants, tracing the secrets of their growth, pressing their fragile forms into pages. He had always believed science was a form of reverence, an act of noticing, of honoring the details others overlooked. Perhaps the greenhouse had noticed him, too. Perhaps that was why it had opened its throat and swallowed him whole. The seeds pulsed again, red, red like a heartbeat split in two. The soundless rhythm filled his skull. Tomorrow. He did not know what the word meant anymore. Would it be a sunrise, a bell toll, a single breath when the soil simply decided? He slumped back to the ground, exhaustion weighing heavy. But as his eyelids sank, the greenhouse stirred once more. A voice, not the flowers, not the shadows, not even his own, rose from the soil itself. A whisper carried on roots, curling into his half-dreaming mind. You may not be asked to choose. You may be asked to witness. He jolted awake, heart hammering. The glow of the seeds seemed brighter, their pulses quicker. The soil trembled faintly beneath his palms, as though preparing. The air grew dense, charged. He felt the weight of something vast leaning closer, a presence that made the walls groan and the glass tremble. It was not the flower. It was not the shadows. It was something deeper, something that lived in the roots themselves. The botanist closed his eyes and whispered into the charged air, "If I am to witness, then let me see everything." The greenhouse shuddered, as if in answer. The red seed flared with sudden heat, and a crack spread further across its shell. A hiss of breath escaped, sharp and alive, curling into the night like smoke. The golden seed glowed brighter, answering, its steady warmth defiant against the spreading crack. The botanist pressed his hands together, shaking, caught between them. His breath trembled out as he whispered into the silence. Not sure if he was praying, pleading, or cursing. Tomorrow will kill me. The soil beneath him shifted, a heartbeat rising from the earth, and the whisper returned, colder this time. Final, or make you something else. The glass panes rattled, as if struck by an invisible hand. The shadows clung tighter. The flower bent low, almost to the soil, its glow dimming like a candle struggling against wind. The botanist sat frozen, the weight of the unseen pressing closer. He could not move. He could only breathe and wait as the greenhouse held its breath. With him tomorrow was no longer distant. It had already begun to arrive, and when it came, he would not stand outside it. He would be buried in it. The red seed pulsed one last time before silence fell. The night ended without ever softening into dawn. When the botanist opened his eyes, the greenhouse did not welcome him with sunlight. The sky beyond the glass was pale and colorless, as though drained of its blue. The air hummed with pressure, a vibration that shook through his ribs and refused to let go. Tomorrow had arrived, not with the gentle certainty of sunrise, but with a silence so sharp it split the world into before and after. The golden seed glowed steady, patient, unyielding. The red seed quivered violently, a hairline crack widening down its shell, each tremor like the breath of something restless within. The botanist crouched near them, his fingers trembling above the soil. He dared not touch, dared not interfere, but every instinct screamed that the seeds no longer belonged only to the earth. They belonged to him, or perhaps he belonged to them. The flower sagged between them, its faint light flickering in uneven gasps, as though exhausted by what it had carried through the night. Its voice, when it came, was little more than a sigh. "They begin." The botanist swallowed hard. "What do I do?" And then his fingers found them. The shadows pressed against the glass again, their faceless forms swarming thicker, filling every panel. They watched without moving, as if this was the moment they had always gathered for. The botanist tried to meet their gaze, though they had no eyes. He felt their silence answering him. "You do nothing." He turned back to the seeds, his heart pounding. The soil between them began to heave, as though caught between two tides. Fine cracks appeared across the bed, spreading in jagged lines. A deep rumble pulsed upward, not sound, but vibration. The earth shifting under his knees. The golden seed's glow spread into the fissures, veins of light threading across the soil like rivers. Warmth radiated from it, and with that warmth came visions, children laughing, fields of wheat bending under sun, scars on the earth slowly knitting closed. But the red seed answered with fire. Its crack split wider, and a hiss of smoke curled upward. The fissures it touched blackened, bleeding shadows. From it came visions, too, cities burning, rivers choked with ash, voices screaming with such force they split the air. The botanist clutched his chest, caught between the two storms. The greenhouse rattled, vines thrashing against the glass, shadows clawing to get closer. His head spun, his own memories flickering like torn paper in the wind. His mother's laugh, his father's silence, a grave he had once dug with his bare hands, a secret he had buried deeper than any root. The seeds were not only choosing for the world, they were choosing for him. The flower arched suddenly, its petals straining toward the ceiling, its mouth opening wide. A cry tore from it, not word, not sound, but a vibration that shook the very glass. It was a plea. The botanist staggered forward, reaching instinctively toward the soil. His hand hovered above the trembling earth, caught between the steady warmth of the golden glow and the burning heat of the red crack. Every nerve screamed against the choice. To touch one was to abandon the other. To choose one was to reshape not only the world, but himself. The shadows pressed closer, their silent mouths moving faster, their whispers scraping through his skull. "Remember, remember." The botanist's breath shuddered out of him. "What if I don't want to forget?" he whispered. "What if I don't want peace without pain? What if truth is worth the fire?" The soil heaved, splitting open beneath his hand. The seeds jolted violently, their light flaring, their heat colliding. For a moment he thought both would burst at once. The glow and the fire met in the fissure, wrestling like wild animals, light devouring shadow, shadow choking light. He fell back, shielding his eyes, the brilliance searing into his skull. The greenhouse wailed, glass panes cracking, ivy tearing itself free. The shadows outside shrieked without sound, their forms unraveling like smoke, and then silence. He opened his eyes slowly, vision blurred. The soil had closed, smoothed flat, as though untouched. The seeds were gone. The flower sagged lifeless, its glow extinguished. The vines hung limp. The greenhouse was still, but the botanist knew nothing was finished, because inside him something pulsed, not his own heartbeat, not his own breath, something else. A glow deep beneath his ribs, flickering with warmth and fire, both. A memory that was not his, a scream that belonged to someone long dead. a laugh he had never heard but would never forget. The seeds had not chosen the earth. They had chosen him. His knees buckled. He collapsed to the floor, clutching his chest, gasping as wave after wave of memory surged through him. He saw lives lived centuries ago, wars fought and lost, fields sown and reaped, cities rising and crumbling. He saw grief so vast it hollowed the stars, and joy so sharp it could cut. It was too much for one mind, one body. He pressed his forehead to the floor, teeth clenched, tears burning his eyes. He could not contain it. He would burst, and then, in the silence, a voice whispered, not from the flower, not from the shadows, not from the roots, from within him. Now you are the garden. The botanist froze, his breath stilled. The voice spoke again, patient, certain. You asked to see everything. The greenhouse creaked above him, the glass groaning as though bowing under invisible weight. The shadows outside had vanished, leaving only the pale sky. He raised his head slowly, his chest still burning, his veins alive with light and fire. His own reflection in the glass looked back at him, but it was wrong. His eyes glowed faintly, golden at the edges, red at the core. The world had not chosen. He had been chosen, and tomorrow was no longer something to wait for. It lived inside him. Now, the botanist did not leave the greenhouse. When morning came, he could not. Outside, the world looked ordinary. Branches swayed in the wind. Clouds wandered across the sky. The faint chatter of distant birds flickered on the edges of his hearing. But none of it was truly ordinary anymore. Not to him, because he could hear beneath it all. Every rustle of leaf carried a voice. Every sway of grass murmured with memory. The roots beneath the soil pulsed faintly, whispering to one another in a language not meant for human ears. And now he understood it. At first, it was unbearable. Fragments crashed into him, shards of other lives jabbing through his thoughts. A child weeping for her lost mother. A farmer sowing seed with hands blistered and raw. Soldiers running through mud, their cries swallowed by thunder. Lovers carving their names into bark that still remembered them. Each sound clung to him like rain soaking into fabric. He could not shake it off. He could not close himself. The voices poured through him, filling every hollow, pressing against every fragile wall inside his skull. His hands trembled as he gripped the wooden table. His breath came ragged. "Stop," he whispered to no one. "Please, stop." But the voices only thickened. Not malicious, not cruel, simply relentless. As if the entire earth had discovered its mouth at once. He staggered to the flower. Its petals were dull now, its glow extinguished, its stem bent with exhaustion. Still, he begged it for help. "You spoke to me once. Speak again. Tell me how to carry this." The flower did not answer. Only the faintest tremble of its leaves, like a dying candle guttering against wind. His chest ached with the weight of it all. He pressed his palms against the soil bed, desperate for balance. And that was when the flood worsened. Roots writhed beneath his touch, their voices surging through him in a torrent. He gasped, his body convulsing as visions split through his mind. He was in a battlefield, mud and fire and endless screams. He was in a nursery, tiny hands grasping at air. The lullaby unfinished. He was in a Saliern, bars rusted, a prayer whispered into the dark. Thousands of lives tore through him in an instant. overlapping, overwhelming, drowning. He ripped his hands away with a cry, collapsing against the floor. His breath heaved, his vision blurred with tears. I can't hold this." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. It was no longer a matter of holding or not holding. The memories had burrowed into him like roots into stone. He was the soil now. He was the vessel. He pressed trembling fingers to his chest. Beneath his skin, he swore he could feel something moving, light winding through his veins, fire licking at his bones. His heartbeat was not his alone anymore. It carried the rhythm of thousands. He staggered to the cracked glass pane, pressing his forehead to the cold surface. His reflection stared back his own face, but changed. His eyes still glowed faintly, gold around the edges, red burning at the center. He whispered to himself, voice shaking, "What am I becoming?" And for the first time since the seeds vanished, the shadows stirred again. They seeped from the corners of the greenhouse, no longer pressed against the glass, but pooling inside, faceless forms dripping into the air like smoke. They moved without sound, without weight, surrounding him in a silent circle. He froze, chest heaving. "Is this what you wanted?" he demanded. "For me to carry all of it? For me to drown in it?" The shadows tilted their heads in unison. He could not read them, but in the silence he felt the answer pressing through. Not drowning, becoming. He shook his head violently. "No, I'm only a man. I can't." The greenhouse trembled. The roots beneath the soil pulsed harder. The whispers thickened, louder, sharper. He pressed his hands to his ears, but it made no difference. The voices were inside him now, blooming. Through his blood, his knees buckled. He fell to the floor once more, gasping. The shadows closed in. Their faceless mouths moved in rhythm, and this time he understood. The garden grows within you now. His breath caught, his chest seared with heat. He clutched at his shirt, feeling the fire surge, the light blaze. It was not only memory anymore, it was will. The earth itself leaning into him, demanding shape. The greenhouse rattled violently, glass panes cracking, vines thrashing like serpents. Soil burst upward in sudden plumes, roots writhing as though alive. The botanist screamed as the force tore through him. Not pain, not pleasure, but something beyond both, and then stillness. The shadows melted away. The vines fell limp. The whispers dimmed to a low hum. The botanist lay sprawled on the floor, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his face. Slowly, with trembling hands, he pushed himself upright. His body ached as though every bone had been shattered and reassembled, and then his fingers found them. But when he raised his hand to the cracked glass, the pain healed beneath his touch. Splintered fractures knitting smooth, shards melting back into place. He stared, wide-eyed, his breath catching in his throat. The memory of destruction, the will of healing, both alive in him, and in that moment he understood the truth the seeds had hidden. They had not asked him to choose between them. They had planted themselves inside him, both. He was golden light. He was red fire. The air was still, but his pulse roared like a storm. He whispered into the quiet, his voice barely holding, "If I am the garden now, then who is the gardener?" His heart thundering, the weight of roots had found its home. The world outside had waited patiently, unaware that its silence was about to end. For days, though he could not measure time anymore, the botanist had been bound within the trembling ribs of the greenhouse. Its air had been his cage, its roots his burden, its shadows his witnesses. But now, with his chest burning like a furnace and his hands humming with strange currents, he felt the pull of the door. The glass panes whispered as he approached. There, once cracked surfaces gleaming smooth again, healed by his touch. His pulse thrummed through the iron, and the door swung open of its own accord. For the first time since the seeds had chosen him, he stepped into the world. The sky was dull, a pale wash of color, but his vision no longer relied on sunlight. He saw deeper. The trees breathed with faint glows of memory. The grass beneath his feet, even the stones murmured, carrying the weight of all they had endured. Everywhere the world was alive. Everywhere the world was watching. The botanist staggered forward, his senses drowning in the flood. He pressed a hand to his temple, but shutting his eyes only sharpened it. Rivers like veins, mountains like bones. He was not merely standing in the world. He was inside it, and it inside him. He whispered to himself, voice trembling, I am the garden. But the second truth followed, heavy as stone, and I am the gardener. His hands shook. He remembered how the cracked glass had sealed itself under his touch. If he was truly gardener, what else could he command? The thought terrified him, but it was not one he could ignore. He crouched near a withered patch of grass, its blades brown and curled. Carefully, with breath held, he pressed his palm to the soil. A warmth surged through him, spilling into the earth. His vision blurred as memories poured upward the grass. Recalling days of sun, the laughter of children running barefoot across it, the weight of rain that once fed its roots. The botanist gasped as the memories bled into him, and then he gave them back. The grass stirred. Slowly, the brown paled to green. The blades lifted, trembling as though stretching after long sleep. Tiny flowers bloomed at their edges, unfurling. White petals in the pale morning light. The botanist pulled his hand back, chest heaving. A strange mix of awe and dread twisted in him. He had given life back. He had commanded the soil, and yet, as the flowers bloomed, so too did shadows. For behind his eyes he saw another vision, the same patch of earth, but burning. Its flowers curling into ash, its soil blackened, cracked, choking on smoke, and deep within, a pulse of red dot. The choice was not gone. It was alive inside him, waiting for his hand to tilt the scale. Golden light, red fire, one could heal, one could wound, and both hungered to be used. The botanist staggered backward, his body trembling. He felt his breath quicken, his skin burn. The whispers thickened again, the grass, the trees, even the stones all calling for him, asking for touch, begging for change. Their voices tangled into a chorus, and he could not tell whether they pleaded for mercy or ruin. He clutched his chest, whispering through clenched teeth, Stop, stop, I can't. But the earth answered anyway. The ground trembled faintly. Beneath him, roots cracked through the soil, snaking outward, weaving into patterns too deliberate to be random. He stumbled back, eyes wide. His pulse raced. He knelt, tracing the roots with trembling fingers. The letters shifted, curling into new shapes. Others will come. His blood ran cold. Others, he whispered. Others like me. The roots twitched in reply, their lines scattering into a circle, perfect and unbroken. A symbol, a warning. He stumbled to his feet, heart pounding. The air thickened. The trees leaned closer. All around, the world seemed to hold its breath. And then, from the far edge of the forest, he heard it. A sound not of nature, not of memory. A sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, drawing closer. The botanist's throat tightened. He turned toward the noise, his chest blazing with golden warmth and red fire, his hands trembling with power he did not want but could not surrender. He whispered into the charged silence, his voice barely holding. "Who are they?" The footsteps stopped. The trees stilled. The air pressed heavy on his skin, and then, carried faintly on the wind, came a voice. "We have been waiting for you." The botanist's breath caught. His pulse hammered. The first bloom was not the end. It was the beginning, and he was no longer alone. The forest held its breath. The botanist stood frozen, chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven waves. His hands tingled with power gold and crimson currents clashing beneath his skin while the echo of that voice drifted through the trees. "We have been waiting for you." The words clung to him like vines. He turned toward the sound, but the shadows were thick, stretched long and unnatural. The trees leaned together, their branches weaving a canopy that shut out what little light the sky offered. It was no longer just forest. It was a hall, a chamber. His instincts screamed to flee, but his feet refused. Silence answered first. Then a figure emerged, faint at the edges, as though the forest itself had sculpted it from bark and shadow. Cloaked in woven leaves, face hidden beneath a hood. The figure's outline flickered with green light-life energy, but colder than his own. "You woke the first bloom," the figure said, voice layered, like two tones speaking at once. "That means you are chosen." They chose you," the figure interrupted, stepping closer. His gaze darted to the trees, to the earth, to the sky, but all pulsed with the same rhythm, as though this stranger's presence was stitched into the fabric of the forest. "How many of you are there?" the botanist whispered. The figure tilted its head. Beneath the hood, something glimmered, a pair of eyes, faintly luminous, one gold, one red, as many as the earth requires, as few as she can bear. The botanist's stomach dropped. He remembered the roots spelling words in the soil. Others will come. This was not metaphor, it was promise. But before he could speak, the figure extended a hand. Vines slid from its sleeve, curling gently in the air, waiting. "You are untrained," the voice continued. "You waste energy healing grass. When mountains thirst and rivers choke, you spill power like water. Do you wish to learn control?" The botanist's breath trembled. His hands still ached from the bloom he had summoned. His mind reeled with the vision of fire he could not banish. He had no choice but to learn or else destroy everything he touched. But some instinct, deep and sharp, kept him wary. "And if I refuse?" The figure paused. Slowly, the forest dimmed further. The grass at their feet wilted. A nearby tree groaned, bark cracking as if strangled. The air thickened until it burned in the lungs. The voice dropped, soft and merciless. "Then the seeds will consume you, and what blooms will not be life." The botanist staggered, pressing a hand to his chest. The golden warmth inside him faltered, drowned by the pull of red fire. For an instant, he felt his veins blaze, saw his hands darken as if bark spread. He gasped, stumbling backward. The figure lowered its hand, and the world eased. The grass lifted, the tree stilled. Yet the threat lingered like smoke. "You are not the first to resist," the figure said, calm once more. "None resist for long." The botanist clenched his fists, forcing breath into his lungs. He wanted to deny them. He wanted to scream that he was not like them. But the truth pulsed beneath his skin. He was. He swallowed hard. "If I follow you, where does it lead?" And then his fingers found them. The figures who dipped, a gesture like a bow, though it carried no humility, to the gathering, to the circle of those who bear the root and the flame, to knowledge of what you are. The botanist's mind churned. Every instinct screamed danger. Yet another part whispered something else. Answers. He could not keep stumbling blind. The figure turned, cloak rustling like leaves in a storm. Without waiting, it began to walk deeper into the forest. "Come," it said, "the others are waiting." The botanist stood, rooted in place. His chest burned with golden warmth, pushing him forward, the red fire urging him to turn back, destroy the figure where it stood. But beyond both, curiosity gnawed at him like hunger, the need to know, the need to understand why the world had chosen him. Slowly, his feet moved, the forest thickened, each step pulling him into a corridor of shadows and whispering roots. He followed the figure deeper, deeper still, until even the sky was gone. Only earth, only breath, only pulse, and somewhere ahead of others. He could feel them now, not with eyes or ears, but with the new sense the seeds had carved into him. Presences, burning, heavy, vast. Some warm, some cold, all alive, waiting, watching. The botanist swallowed hard, heart trembling, as though standing before a door that would not close once opened. The figure ahead spoke again, voice echoing like roots spreading through soil. "Welcome, child of the bloom. Step into the circle and see what you truly are." The path opened. A glow ahead, a ring of shapes, cloaked and waiting, and the botanist knew his life was no longer his own. The glow ahead was not fire, nor lantern, nor moonlight. It was alive, pulsing softly, as if the forest itself had gathered its breath and held it in a trembling hand. The botanist stepped forward. His pulse matched the rhythm of the light, each beat dragging him deeper, deeper, until he broke into a clearing unlike any he had seen. The ground was bare, stripped of grass, yet not dead. Veins of glowing roots stretched across the soil, spiraling toward a center where an ancient stump stood. The stump was cracked, hollow, yet alive with faint green fire that rose like smoke. Around it, 13 figures sat in a circle. They did not speak, they did not move, but their presence pressed against him like a storm. The figure who had led him bowed its head slightly, and the others answered with silence, silence so heavy it rang louder than any voice. The botanist's breath hitched. He could feel them through the seeds in his chest, each one a vast current of power. One was cool and silver, like moonlight on still water. Another burned hot and erratic, like wildfire leaping from tree to tree. A third radiated decay, a rot that somehow fed life. Each presence was different, but all were bound by the same thread. He was one of them. The stump pulsed, brighter now, as though aware of him. A voice rose not from a mouth, but from the soil itself. "Another has awakened." The circle grows, the figures shifted, and for the first time they raised their heads. Faces shone beneath their hoods, faces not quite human. Some were etched with bark-like living masks. Some had eyes burning with strange light. Some bore hair like moss or threads of vine. Yet their expressions were calm, as though this gathering was nothing more than a quiet meal. One leaned forward. Their eyes gleamed like molten amber. "You carry the first bloom," they said softly. "Golden warmth, red fire, rare, dangerous." The botanist swallowed hard. His voice cracked. "I didn't ask for this." A ripple passed through the circle. Not laughter, not scorn, something colder. "None of us did." Another voice replied, low and steady. "The roots choose, the seeds grow where they will. We are but soil for their design." The botanist shivered. Soil. That word dug into him like claws. The stump pulsed again, its green fire flaring brighter. The voice returned, heavier now. "The balance breaks. The world above consumes without giving. Rivers dry, forests choke. The circle must act." The figures lowered their heads, as if in reverence. All except one. Across the ring, a cloaked form shifted violently. Their hood fell back, revealing a face lined with fury. Eyes glowed crimson, sharp and unyielding. "No," they snapped. "We have bowed long enough. The world does not need balance. It needs fire. It needs to be broken and remade." The botanist's chest burned. At the sound, red fire within him stirred, pulling him toward the speaker like a magnet. The others tensed, murmurs rippling like rustling leaves. The amber-eyed one raised a hand. "Peace. We will not descend into war among ourselves." But the red-eyed figure leaned forward, gaze piercing the botanist. "You feel it, don't you? The fire inside you, the hunger, the power. The seeds gave you more than you can bear. Don't let them chain you. Burn the world that burns you." The botanist's breath faltered. His skin prickled, veins glowing faintly with crimson light. He wanted to deny it, to look away, but he could not, because part of him did feel it. The fire, the hunger, the golden warmth fought back, a gentle pulse against his ribs. But it was small, fragile, like a candle against a storm. The red-eyed figure smiled faintly, cruelly. "You see, you are not theirs. You are mine." The botanist staggered, gripping his chest. The circle closed in, their eyes fixed on him, some wary, some hopeful, some afraid. The stump's fire flared again, the voice rising, thunderous. "Choose, child of bloom. The circle waits. The world waits. Will you heal, or will you burn?" The botanist gasped, vision swimming. He saw rivers cracking, forests withering, fire racing across the horizon. He saw his hands drenched in light gold and red, mercy and ruin. Both possible, both inevitable. His knees buckled, the world tilted, and as he fell, he heard a whisper, not from the circle, not from the stump, but from within himself. "You are not soil. You are seed." The words rang like truth, and then darkness closed over him. Darkness. The botanist drifted in it, weightless, formless, as though his body had dissolved into mist. No soil beneath him, no sky above, only silence, thick and endless. Then one heartbeat, his own, loud, resonant, echoing through the void. Another heartbeat followed, not his own. Then another. Soon the air throbbed with countless pulses, a symphony of living hearts, roots, rivers. The rhythm shook him to his core. He gasped, and the darkness broke apart. He stood in a vast plain, but this was no ordinary earth. The soil glowed faintly, streaked with veins of gold and crimson that pulsed like blood through skin. In the distance, a tree towered higher than mountains, its trunk spiraling into the heavens, branches reaching beyond sight. Half of its canopy glowed with brilliant green, lush and alive. The other half burned in silent fire, its leaves reduced to ash that never fell. The botanist's breath caught. His chest burned in answer golden warmth and red fire, surging at once. A voice rose, not thunderous this time, but quiet, threaded with sorrow. "This is the root of all things." The botanist turned. A figure stood beside him, not cloaked like the circle, but radiant, shifting, neither man nor woman, neither bark nor flesh. Their skin shimmered like polished wood, their eyes glowed with both gold and red. They were balance and destruction. In one, the botanist whispered, trembling, What is this place?" The figure's gaze lifted to the burning tree, the dream of the world, the seed at its heart. "Every root, every leaf, every river is born here, and every fire that consumes begins here as well." The botanist stepped closer, his feet sinking into the glowing soil. It pulsed against his skin, alive, almost pleading. "Why am I here?" The figure looked at him, eyes solemn. "Because the seed chose you. Because you carry what no one else has carried, both bloom and flame, life and ruin." The botanist's throat tightened. "Then tell me, am I meant to heal or destroy?" The figure's face softened, though sorrow deepened in their gaze. "That is the question every bearer asks. Some choose one path, some the other, and some—" They paused, as if the words themselves resisted. "Some lose themselves, and the seed chooses for them." A chill rippled through the botanist. His mind flashed with the red-eyed figures. "Voice burn, the world that burns you." He shook his head, pressing a hand to his chest, as if to steady the war inside. "But why me?" he whispered. "Why now?" The figure gestured toward the sky, where cracks spread like lightning across the horizon. Through them poured shadows, black tendrils that fell upon the plains, draining light wherever they touched. The golden veins dimmed, the soil cracked, the world above falters. The figure said, voice sharp now, urgent, "The balance collapses. Too much is taken, too little returned. The roots grow weak. The seed awakens bearers when the earth can no longer mend herself." The botanist's eyes widened as the shadows spread, swallowing entire swaths of the glowing plain. The great tree groaned, its branches trembling, ash cascading from its burning half. His voice cracked. "If it dies, does the world die with it?" The figure did not answer. Instead, they placed a hand upon his chest. Golden warmth surged. Red fire flared. For a moment, the two did not clash. They twined, braided together, blooming like a rose of flame. The botanist gasped, knees nearly buckling as visions flooded him. Forests healing with a single touch, rivers restored by his breath. But also cities burning, oceans boiling, mountains crumbling to ash. He saw himself in both. He saw the world in both. The figure's voice whispered close to his ear, "You are not bound to soil, nor to circle. You are seed. What you grow will shape more than trees. It will shape everything." The botanist staggered back, clutching his chest. I can't decide that. I'm no god." The figure's eyes glimmered with something unreadable. "No, but even gods must begin as seeds." Before he could respond, the ground shuddered. The shadows swarmed, rushing toward him. The golden veins flickered out, crimson flared. The great tree cracked down its center. The botanist cried out as the fire within him surged uncontrollably. The figure's voice echoed one last time, fading as the darkness closed in. Choose, child of bloom, or the choice will be made for you. The world shattered and he woke. The botanist gasped, lungs burning, as his eyes snapped open. He was back in the circle. The 13 figures loomed over him, their eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. The stump's green fire hissed and crackled, louder now, urgent. He staggered upright, chest blazing with unbearable heat, veins glowing gold and red all at once. His voice broke as he whispered into the waiting silence. I saw the tree, I saw. What's coming? The circle leaned in, breaths held, shadows closing tighter, and in the red-eyed figure's smile, he saw both promise and ruin. The botanist's breath came ragged, each inhale tasting of smoke, though no fire burned. His chest glowed faintly, veins of gold and crimson threading his skin like cracks in porcelain. The circle leaned closer, their faces carved with shadow and strange light, their silence thicker than words. At last the stump spoke. Its green fire rose high, embers spiraling into the canopy. The dream has touched him. He has seen the tree. The figures shifted. Some bowed their heads in reverence, others stiffened in unease. The botanist stood trembling, heart pounding in a rhythm that no longer felt entirely his own. He forced his voice through the weight in his lungs. It's dying, he said. The tree, it's burning, and if it falls, everything falls. The words seemed to crack the silence. Murmurs broke out across the circle, sharp and clashing like branches in a storm. One voice argued for action, another urged patience, a third demanded sacrifice. The red-eyed figure cut through them all. Then we burn what remains before it rots us. Their voice was fire, low and hungry. They leaned forward, eyes fixed on the botanist with a terrible knowing. You saw it, didn't you? The flame inside you, it answered. You are not meant for balance. You are meant for the end and for the beginning that follows. The botanist shook his head, though his chest betrayed him. The crimson pulsed stronger, clawing up his veins. No, that's not all I saw. The bloom, the warmth. There's another way. A silver-eyed figure spoke then, their voice soft, like moonlight spilling over still water. He speaks truth. The seed has always given to face his creation and undoing. Without balance, both destroy. The red-eyed figure's lip curled. Balance is a lie for the weak. Fire does not negotiate with ash. The circle stirred again, voices colliding, some siding with flame, others with bloom. The botanist stood in the middle, caught in their storm, his pulse quickening, his power trembling at the edge of control. Then dash, the ground cracked beneath him. Roots lashed upward, curling around his ankles. The stump's fire blazed, voice thunderous now. He must choose. Now, the botanist cried out, stumbling as golden warmth surged in his chest, fighting against the red inferno. His vision split, half bathed in light, half drenched in fire. His knees buckled, palms pressing into the soil, and then betrayal. The red-eyed figure moved. With a sudden lunge, they thrust out their hand, crimson fire exploding from their palm. It struck the botanist's chest like lightning. He screamed, back arching, as the flame inside him roared to life. The circle erupted. Some shouted in outrage. Others reached to stop it, but too late. The botanist's body blazed with crimson light, fire racing through his veins. His eyes flared red, breath pouring smoke. The red-eyed figure's voice cut through the chaos. "See, he is ours. He cannot deny what he is." The botanist staggered upright, chest heaving, fire spilling from his fingertips. The golden warmth within him struggled, flickered, almost extinguished. He looked at his hands, horrified. Every leaf, every root that touched him withered instantly, curling to ash. His voice broke. "This isn't me," but it was, and the circle knew it. The silver-eyed figure stepped forward, raising both arms. "Stop this. If he loses himself now, the seed will take him entirely." The circle froze, torn between sides. The clearing heavy with firelight and shadow. The botanist fell to his knees again, tears stinging his eyes. He could feel it, the fire clawing at his mind, whispering promises of release, of freedom, of power. The golden warmth tried to answer, but it was faint, fragile. A whisper lost in storm. He whispered to himself, voice cracking, "I won't burn the world. I won't." But the stump's fire raged higher, its voice shaking the earth. "Then master it, or it will master you." The botanist gasped, eyes wild, hands shaking with fire he could not contain. The circle watched, waiting, divided. Some ready to save him, others ready to let him fall. And as his body trembled between bloom and flame, he realized the truth. This was no longer about choice. This was survival. The botanist's scream tore through the clearing like a storm breaking. His body shook, his veins burning rivers of crimson light. The golden warmth fought, but it was drowned in fire. Sparks scattered in a raging sea. The roots at his feet shriveled into ash. The soil cracked, glowing red from within. Trees at the edge of the circle bent away, their leaves crisping in sudden heat. The red-eyed figure's laughter split the silence. "Yes, at last, the fire chooses." The botanist staggered to his feet, though he barely knew his own body. Flame poured from his palms in violent arcs, uncontrolled, hungry. He turned in panic, and where his gaze fell, the world blackened. "No, stop," he cried. But the fire did not listen. The circle erupted into chaos. Some leaped back, cloaks flaring. Others raised hands, weaving barriers of green light or silver mist to shield themselves. The silver-eyed figure ran forward, their voice cutting through the blaze. "Fight it. You are not flame alone." But their words could not reach him. The fire was not just around him, was inside, whispering, urging, "Why fight? Let me burn, let me cleanse." "You saw the Tretha, ash is truth." He dropped to his knees, clutching his skull as if to tear the voice out. Flames burst upward, spiraling into the canopy, turning night into a second sun. Birds fled in screaming flocks, animals bolted through the undergrowth. The entire forest trembling beneath the heat. The stump in the center cracked loudly, its green fire sputtering as if suffocating. Roots writhed in the soil, desperate, choking. On the blaze, the red-eyed figure thrust their hand high, shouting above the roar, "Do not stop him. Let it consume. This is the world's rebirth." But others shouted back, fury in their tones. The circle fractured into two halves, one urging restraint, the other demanding release. The botanist's vision blurred. He saw not forest, not circle, but the dream again, the colossal tree, burning, half in ash, half in bloom, His own body mirrored it. Gold flickered weakly in his chest, but red surged, overwhelming. I can hold it. His voice was barely a breath. The silver-eyed figure dropped to their knees beside him, pressing glowing hands against his chest. A cool wave surged through him, silver light, weaving with gold, dimming the red for a heartbeat. Breathe, they whispered urgently. Breathe before it takes you. For one brief moment, clarity broke through. He felt the warmth, again the bloom, fragile but alive. It called to him, begged him not to surrender. But the fire roared louder, clawing back. Control. His body convulsed, fire bursting outward in a shockwave. The silver-eyed figure was hurled back, crashing into the circle. The botanist's eyes flared open, glowing crimson, unrecognizable. Flames spiraled around him like wings, his breath a furnace. He rose from the ground without meaning to, lifted by the storm of his own power, and the forest screamed. Every tree for miles bent and broke. Leaves ignited mid-air. Rivers hissed and boiled, animals collapsing in ash. The night itself seemed to bleed fire. The red-eyed figure watched in awe, smiling wide, as if seeing prophecy fulfilled. Yes, yes, the fire claims him. The others looked on in horror, their faces pale in the blaze. The botanist's voice rose, but it was not entirely his own. It was layered, doubled his, and something deeper, ancient, merciless. I am seed. I am flame. I am the end. The red fire roared higher, devouring the sky. The clearing became a furnace, the circle scattered, the stumps, fire, nearly gone. And then, through the chaos, a whisper, soft, steady, golden. From somewhere deep inside him, fragile yet unyielding. You are not only flame, you are bloom. Remember, the botanist froze, suspended between voices. One urging destruction, one urging life. His entire being tore in two. His scream split the night, louder than thunder, and the fire collapsed inward, imploding, vanishing into silence. When the light cleared, the botanist lay motionless on the charred ground. Smoke rose from his body, his veins dim. The forest around him smoldered, scarred, broken. The circle stood in silence, faces lit by dying embers. The silver-eyed figure crawled forward, reaching out with trembling hands. He lives, they whispered, breath shaking. But the red-eyed figure's smile only widened. For now the forest did not sing that night. It groaned, it smoldered, it wept. The botanist awoke to the stench of smoke in his throat, the bitter taste of ash on his lips. He tried to move, but every muscle screamed, his body raw and scorched. When he lifted his head, the world around him was unrecognizable. Once verdant trees stood blackened, stripped of life. Rivers that once whispered through the roots lay as cracked beds of steam. The ground itself was charred, glowing faintly, as if embers still lived beneath its skin. He staggered to his feet, swaying, his hands trembled, hands that had once nurtured seedlings, hands that had cradled fragile blooms. Now they were blackened, burned, clawed with cracks of dull crimson light that pulsed faintly. He remembered the fire, the voice, the way the forest screamed, and his stomach twisted with guilt. The circle lingered in the shadows, their faces unreadable. Some looked at him with hatred, others with awe, a few with pity, but none approached. Not yet. Only the silver-eyed figure stepped forward. Their cloak was torn, their face streaked with soot, yet their presence still radiated calm. They crouched before him, pressing a hand against his chest. The botanist flinched, expecting fire. But instead, a cool stream of silver warmth spread through him, enough to steady his breath. "You are alive," they whispered, almost in disbelief. But the forest, their voice broke. They turned their gaze toward the horizon, where flames still licked at distant treetops. He followed their eyes and felt his chest tighten. The devastation stretched as far as he could see, a scar carved across the heart of the wild. His knees buckled. I did this." The silver-eyed figure gripped his chin, forcing his gaze upward. Their tone sharpened, urgent. "No, it was the flame through you. If you let it, it will chain you with guilt. That is how it wins." But even as they spoke, the red-eyed figure emerged from the blackened haze, their cloak untouched by ash, their eyes burning like coals. "Chain." They laughed softly, the sound echoing against the hollow trunks. "No. What I see is freedom. Power finally unbound. The fire chose him, as I said it would." The circle shifted uneasily. Some lowered their heads in silent agreement. Others hissed in protest. The botanist stepped back, shaking. "I didn't choose this. I never wanted choice." The red-eyed figure's smile deepened. "You think seeds choose whether to grow, whether to break their shells, to split the soil? No. They become what the earth demands." They spread their arms to the smoldering wasteland. "This is not death, this is cleansing. Look, already the ash feeds the ground. Soon new life will surge from it, stronger than before. You, botanist, are not destroyer, you are renewal." The botanist's throat closed. Renewal. The forest looked anything but alive yet. As he scanned the ground, he saw it tiny green shoots poking through the ash, impossibly fast, already reaching toward the sky. The circle gasped, some whispering in fear, others in wonder. His hands shook harder. Was this his doing? The figure stepped between him and the red-eyed one, voice sharp as a blade. "Do not twist him with your poison. Renewal without balance is ruin. The fire feeds, but it devours more than it gives. You know this." The red-eyed figure chuckled darkly. "Balance. Balance is stagnation. He will see. The fire is not curse, it is truth." The botanist's ears rang. Their voices clashed like storm and flame. But deeper still, another whisper stirred inside. Him.seed. Flame. Choice. The words rattled in his skull. His heart pounded with both fear and something else, something he did not want to name. A sudden crack split the night. The charred earth beneath the stump shuddered violently. From its core, a fissure yawned open, glowing with molten light. The remnants of the green fire hissed as tendrils of red surged upward, spilling into the air. The circle fell back, some shielding their faces. The botanist froze. The voice returned, louder, pulsing from the fissure itself. "Come closer." His feet moved without his will. One step, another. The ground trembled, ash crumbling beneath him. The silver-eyed figure grabbed his arm, desperate. "No. If you touch it, you may not return." The red-eyed figure's voice rang behind him, fervent, commanding. "Touch it. Claim what is yours. Let the fire crown you." The botanist's body trembled, torn between the two voices, between the hands, pulling him forward and holding him back. The fissure widened, molten roots writhing like serpents. and from its depths came a heat so intense it warped the air. He stared into it, and for a heartbeat he saw his own reflection in the flames, his face split in two, one side alive with golden warmth, the other consumed by red fire. And in that moment he realized the truth. The fire wasn't just inside him, it was waiting for him, watching, testing, and it wanted an answer. The fissure breathed like a living thing. Every rise of molten light pulsed in rhythm with the botanist's own chest, as if the earth itself had learned his heartbeat. The air shimmered with a fevered glow, bending shapes into twisted phantoms. He stood at its edge, trembling, his reflection fractured in the burning pit. One half of him still the man who once whispered to seedlings and coaxed vines from the dark, the other half a figure of flame, crowned in fire, eyes hollow with hunger. The circle held its breath. Even the night creatures had gone silent, as though the forest itself waited for his choice. The silver-eyed figure clung to his arm, their voice low but fierce. Don't listen. You are still yourself. You are more than this fire. You are not its vessel. But the red-eyed figure's laugh split the silence like a knife through cloth. Not its vessel. Foolish one. He is its heir. The fire has been circling this world for centuries, seeking soil fertile enough to take root. And now it has found him. It will not let him go. The botanist's knees weakened. His skin still bore scars from the blaze, and yet inside those wounds something glowed faintly, tiny veins of light threading under his flesh. They pulsed when the fissure pulsed. They throbbed when the whisper called, Step closer, touch me, let us burn together. The botanist's lips parted, his voice cracked, uncertain. Why me? The fissure answered not with words, but with visions. The molten light twisted, rising into shapes that formed and collapsed within heartbeats. He saw fields of ash stretching endlessly, entire forests burning, but then sprouting again, greener, stronger. He saw cities of stone swallowed by creeping vines that burst into flame, leaving ruins that glowed like lanterns in the dark. And finally, he saw himself not as a man, but as something vast, rooted deep into the earth, crowned in fire. His breath itself a storm that could scorch or heal with a single sigh. The botanist staggered back, clutching his skull. His breath rasped like a man drowning. This isn't life. This is madness. The red-eyed figure stepped forward, their tone reverent. Madness? No, it is the oldest truth. Fire is the first language. Before words, before songs, before even breath, it was fire that shaped the world. And now it has chosen to speak again, through you. The silver-eyed figure tightened their grip, eyes flashing with desperate defiance. Chosen or consumed. Fire speaks only of hunger. Do not confuse destruction for destiny. The botanist's gaze darted between them, two halves of a war that now lived inside his chest. His heart pounded louder, each beat sending a jolt of fire through his veins. And then silence. The fissure stilled. The molten glow sank into sudden darkness, leaving only faint embers at the edges. For one breath, one fragile moment, it seemed as though the earth itself had exhaled and gone still. But beneath the hush, the botanist felt it. The fire had not died. It had entered him. His veins burned like threads of lightning. His lungs filled with searing heat. He staggered, clutching his chest, falling to his knees. The circle gasped in unison. Some fled back into the smoke. Others knelt in awe. The silver-eyed figure dropped beside him, pressing both hands against his shoulders, whispering furiously, "Fight it. You are more than flame. Remember the roots, the soil, the quiet. Remember the plants you loved. Hold on to them." But the red-eyed figure's voice rose like thunder, drowning out all else. "Stop fighting. Let it bloom. This is your crown, botanist, where it become the fire's root in this world. Burn, and the world will kneel." The botanist screamed. His body arched, his hands clawed into the soil. The ground beneath him cracked, glowing with thin rivers of light that spread outward like veins across the ash. The fissure responded, flaring to life again, brighter than before. But this time it bent toward him, not against him. The flames coiled upward like vines, wrapping his limbs, twining his torso, kissing his brow. And yet they did not burn. They clung. The botanist opened his eyes, and for the first time they were not wholly his own. Within the green depths of his gaze flickered streaks of molten red, as if two worlds fought for space inside him. The circle whispered in horror. The silver-eyed figure recoiled, their breath catching. "Oh no." The red-eyed figure smiled, triumphant, bowing their head in reverence. "It is done." The botanist staggered upright, swaying as though drunk on fire. His voice cracked like branches, breaking, both human and something else. "What have I become?" The fissure pulsed once more, and deep within the roar of its molten song, the fire whispered its answer. Mine. The botanist stood at the edge of himself. One half of him was still soil, still seed, still the quiet dreamer who once knelt with trembling hands to cradle roots in the dark. The other half was flame-wild, insatiable, demanding. His veins glowed with both. His chest heaved like a storm trying to choose between rain and fire. The circle surrounded him in fearful silence. Faces flickered in the shifting light, some twisted with awe, some with horror. They had seen many guardians rise and fall, but never, a man torn cleanly down the middle by two truths. The red-eyed figure lifted their chin, voice trembling with hunger. "Look at him. The fire has found its heir. He need not bow to balance any more. He can be both root and flame. He can consume, and he can renew. This is the crown of the forgotten botanist." But the silver-eyed figure stepped forward, their voice sharper than it had ever been. "No, this is no crown. It is a chain. If he accepts both, he will shatter, and when he does, the world will shatter with him." The botanist's breath burned, his hands shook violently. The earth under his feet cracked, glowing rivers of molten light running outward. Yet, beside those glowing lines, impossibly, green shoots broke through the ash. Roots writhed in tandem with fire, curling around his ankles, anchoring him to both earth and flame. He staggered, eyes wide. "Both are inside me. I feel them fighting. If I choose fire, I burn everything I love." "Me," the fissure roared, answering like a beast. The flames surged higher, licking the sky, as though impatient for his final answer. The red-eyed figure stretched out their hand. "Then stop being you." The silver-eyed figure reached for him, their voice breaking. "No. Remember who you are. Remember the soil under your nails, the quiet patience of life. Do not let the fire's hunger erase you." The botanist clutched his head, falling to his knees. His scream carried both voices at once, man and flame, root and ash. The ground split wide beneath him. From the fissure rose a vision, half a forest thriving in golden light, half a wasteland choked in endless fire. The two halves mirrored the war in his chest, and in that moment he understood this was never about choosing one or the other. It was about sacrifice to save the world. One half of him must die. His eyes filled with tears. His voice came out, raw, trembling. If I let the fire go, I will burn from within. The circle watched, silent, as he pressed his hands to the soil, feeling both fire and root surge upward through him. His body arched, every vein glowing, every muscle trembling, as though torn by two gods. And then he made his choice. He drew in one final breath of fire and soil, and instead of keeping one, he gave them both back. A roar split the night as the fissure exploded, flames spiraling into the sky, roots bursting upward in a green storm. They wrapped round each other, fire and root, until the two forces tore free from his body in a blinding column of light. The botanist collapsed. The roots no longer bound his heart. He was only himself, again fragile, mortal, forgotten. The silver-eyed figure caught him, lowering him gently. Their tears fell silently, glowing faintly in the last embers of light. You gave them both away to save us. The red-eyed figure's smile faltered, their voice cracking with disbelief. He refused the crown. The light faded, leaving the forest quiet. Fireflies flickered where embers had once danced. The botanist's voice was faint, barely a whisper. Maybe that's all I ever was meant to be. Not fire, not crown, just a man who listened to what grows in the dark. The silver-eyed figure gripped his hand, pressing it to their chest. You will not be forgotten. The circle bowed their heads. Whether in sorrow or reverence, it no longer mattered. Above them, the forest breathed again. Roots stirred, leaves whispered. A wind carried away the last of the ash, leaving behind the scent of rain and earth. The botanist closed his eyes. His chest rose once more, then fell, like a seed finally sinking into soil. And as the night grew still, his story became the forest's story, whispered by leaves, carried by roots, flickering in the glow of fireflies. Some said he had died. Others swore he lived still, buried deep. Neither root nor flame, but something in between, dreaming beneath the soil. And so the legend grew. The forgotten botanist, the one who gave up his crown of ash and bloom so the world could breathe. The forest went quiet.